is Olivia. I'm 30 years old, and 4 years ago, my boyfriend of 4 years left me for my own better sister, with the full encouragement of his wealthy family. Before I tell you how I turned that gut-wrenching betrayal into a multi-million-dollar tech company that ultimately crushed his, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It all ended with a picture. A single, glossy, perfectly filtered picture on Instagram. I was sitting on my worn-out sofa, the one we'd bought together from a thrift store, scrolling numbly through my phone when it appeared. There they were, Ethan, the man I'd shared my tiny apartment, my dreams, and my rescued cat with for 4 years, and Mia, my younger sister. His arm was wrapped possessively around her waist, her head tilted onto his shoulder, a triumphant little smirk playing on her lips. They were standing in front of the Blackwood family's sprawling estate, the place I was never truly welcome. The caption, written by Ethan, read, "Finally found the one who just fits." The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand, so cold it burned. It was a physical shock, like being plunged into a frozen lake. The air was punched out of my lungs. The silence in my small apartment became deafening, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft purr of my cat, Pixel, who was rubbing against my leg, completely oblivious to the fact that our little world had just been obliterated. Just 3 days earlier, Ethan had stood in this very room, right by the window overlooking the fire escape, and fed me a rehearsed speech about needing stability and someone who fit better with his family's plans for the future. I'd screamed then. I'd cried, my voice raw and pleading. I'd asked him, "Is this about Mia? Just tell me the truth." He couldn't even look me in the eye, just stared at a crack in the plaster on the wall as he muttered denials. Now, here was the proof, a digital billboard broadcasting my humiliation to all our friends, our family, the entire world. For years of my life, of late-night study sessions where he'd bring me coffee, of road trips singing off-key to bad 90s music, of whispered promises about our future, all of it erased by a single post. I just stared at the screen, at their smiling faces, and one thought echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my apartment: how did I become the side character in my own life? Our story had started just as clumsily as it had ended brutally. I was a scholarship student at university, perpetually buried in computer science textbooks, my hair in a messy bun and coffee stains on my sweatshirt. He was the golden boy of the business management program, heir to a fortune, with a smile that could disarm anyone. I literally ran into him, spilling a giant, milky latte all over his $1,000 laptop. My frantic, mortified apologies somehow turned into him buying me a new coffee, which turned into a date, which turned into 4 years. He said he loved that I was real, that I was passionate about something other than social climbing. He said my brain was the most attractive thing about me. We built a life in my modest, one-bedroom apartment. It was small, but it was ours. We painted the walls a sunny yellow, adopted Pixel from a shelter, and spent our weekends building a life that felt a million miles away from the stiff, cold world of his parents. For a while, I truly believed our love was a universe of its own, strong enough to withstand anything. But the cracks were always there, hairline fractures I chose to paper over with hope. His parents, the formidable Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, never saw me as anything more than a temporary diversion, a youthful rebellion. For years, at every stiff family dinner and charity gala I was forced to attend, Mrs. Blackwood would introduce me with a smile that never reached her eyes. "And this is Olivia," she'd say, her voice dripping with condescension. "Ethan's friend." The word hung in the air, a polite but firm dismissal. They spoke of Ethan's future as if it were a corporate merger, a strategic alliance of powerful families. They'd discuss the importance of a proper family inheritance, and the kind of woman who would be a suitable steward for it. A woman with the right pedigree, the right connections, the right, quiet ambition that served the family, not herself. It was painfully clear I wasn't that woman. My own family wasn't much better. They were a different kind of cold. I was the quiet, nerdy one, the one who got good grades but didn't have the right social graces. Mia was the star. She was more polished, more charming, the one my parents poured all their hopes and resources into. A minor promotion at her entry-level marketing job was cause for a celebratory dinner. My winning a university-wide coding competition earned me a pat on the back. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" my mother would sigh over Sunday dinner, looking at my practical jeans and worn-out university sweatshirt. "Mia knows how to present herself. She's going to land a great husband, someone who can really take care of her." Mia would just sit there, soaking it all in, giving me a little pitying look over the rim of her wineglass. She'd always been jealous of me and Ethan, but it was a sneaky, corrosive jealousy. She'd make little comments, planting seeds of doubt. "Are you sure he's serious, Liv? A guy from a family like that, he has options. You have to be realistic." I remember one particularly awful Blackwood party, a stuffy affair where the air smelled of old money and new hypocrisy. I was trying to explain the concept behind my startup idea to one of Ethan's uncles, a man whose eyes glazed over the second I said the word algorithm. He patted my arm condescendingly and said, "That's nice, dear. But what about settling down?" Then Daniel, one of Ethan's friends, came over. He wasn't like the others. He'd actually listened, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Wait, so you're using machine learning to predict loopholes in boilerplate contracts?" he'd asked, his eyes lit with genuine interest. "That's not just clever, that's a multi-million-dollar idea. You're really onto something." For a moment, I felt seen. For a moment, I wasn't just Ethan's friend. I was a person with a brain. It was a brief flash of light in a world that was slowly dimming around me. But I dismissed it, clinging to Ethan, believing his love was the only validation I needed. I was so wrong. The beginning of the end was a dinner invitation. It came directly from Mrs. Blackwood, a rare and therefore alarming event. "Just a casual family dinner, Olivia," she had chirped over the phone, her voice dripping with a false warmth that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "We'd love for you to come. Just us." I was thrilled and terrified. Maybe this was it. Maybe after 4 years, they were finally ready to accept me. I spent money I didn't have on a new dress. I borrowed a pearl necklace from my friend Zoe. I spent an hour on my hair and makeup, trying to look like the kind of woman who belonged in their world. I walked into their sprawling mansion, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, feeling a dangerous flutter of hope. The hope died the second I stepped through the grand double doors. It wasn't a casual dinner. It was a formal gathering, a carefully curated parade of the Blackwoods' wealthiest friends and their perfectly pedigreed children. I was completely out of my depth, a goldfish thrown into a tank of piranhas. And then I saw her. Mia. She was seated next to Ethan at the head of the long, polished dining table. She was wearing a stunning emerald green dress that probably cost more than my rent for 6 months. She hadn't been mentioned in the invitation, but she looked perfectly at home, laughing and chatting with Mrs. Blackwood as if they were old confidants. The entire dinner was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to humiliate me. It was a public trial, and I was the defendant. Mr. Blackwood would ask me about my little computer project, his tone laced with a patronizing amusement, before turning to Mia and booming, "Now, Mia, tell everyone about your internship at the prestigious Henderson firm. We see a real future for you there. A corner office, I shouldn't wonder." Every answer I gave was met with polite, vacant stares. Every story Mia told, embellished for maximum effect, was met with enthusiastic applause and murmurs of approval. She was charming, witty, and everything I wasn't. She was the better option, and they were showcasing her like a prize racehorse at auction. I felt my face burning, a hot flush of shame crawling up my neck. I looked at Ethan, pleading with my eyes for him to say something, to defend me, to just take my hand. He just shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. He was impressed by her. He was laughing at her jokes. In that moment, I saw our entire future dissolve into dust. I wasn't his partner, I was an embarrassing liability, an obstacle to the life his parents had so meticulously planned for him. A week later, he came to my apartment to deliver the final verdict. The breakup was clinical, efficient. He stood by the window, refusing to sit, as if the worn fabric of my sofa might contaminate him. He delivered his lines like he'd rehearsed them in a mirror. I need stability, Olivia. I need someone who understands my world, who fits with my family's expectations for the future. Is this about Mia? I whispered, the words catching in my throat like shards of glass. He hesitated for just a second too long, a flicker of guilt in his eyes before it was extinguished. My parents think she's a better match. That was it. Not I've fallen in love with your sister. Not I'm a terrible person. Just a cold, calculated business decision. My parents think. After he left, a sick, undeniable feeling led me to our shared tablet. I don't know why I looked. Maybe I needed to see the wound to believe it was real. And there they were, months of text messages. Secret lunches. Flirtatious comments. Plans they'd made behind my back. He hadn't just left me, he'd been cheating on me with my own sister for months, all while sleeping in my bed and telling me he loved me. 3 days later, the Instagram post went public. The final, twisting knife in the coffin was a phone call from my own mother. Olivia, I'm so proud of Mia, she gushed, her voice ecstatic. She's finally secured such a good match. This is a huge step up for our family. You should be happy for your sister. I felt the air leave my lungs. Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He was my boyfriend. For 4 years. We lived together. There was a short, cold silence on the other end of the line. Well, she said, her tone shifting, becoming defensive. Let's be honest, dear. Mia was always better suited for someone like Ethan. It was bound to happen. You have to be realistic. My startup, my passion project, the thing I had poured my soul into, failed during a crucial investor presentation a few weeks later. I stood in front of a boardroom of stone-faced men, my mind a complete fog of betrayal and grief. The words wouldn't come. The code I knew like the back of my hand felt like a foreign language. I lost the funding. Soon after, I lost the apartment. I lost everything. I ended up on my best friend Zoe's couch, surrounded by moving boxes filled with the wreckage of my life. To make ends meet, to just survive, I started delivering food on an app. It was humbling, anonymous work. And then came the moment that shattered what was left of my fragile dignity. A delivery to a high-end French restaurant downtown, the kind of place Ethan and I used to dream of going to for a special occasion. I walked in, holding the greasy paper bag, the smell of truffles and money thick in the air. My eyes scanned the dining room, and then they locked across the sea of white tablecloths. There they were. Ethan and Mia. Seated at a prime table by the window, laughing over a bottle of expensive champagne. For a heart-stopping second, our eyes met. Mia's smile faltered. She gave a little shake of her head, a barely perceptible gesture, as if pretending not to know me. Then, she leaned over and whispered something to Ethan. He looked over at me, his face a mask of deep discomfort, before quickly looking away, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on his bread plate. He didn't even nod. He just erased me. Mia then looked back at me, her expression shifting to one of pure, condescending pity. It was the kind of look you'd give a stray dog, wet and shivering in the rain. It was a public execution of my worth. That was my rock bottom. I turned and walked out of that restaurant, the weight of the food delivery bag feeling like the weight of my entire failed life. I didn't stop walking for hours, the city lights blurring through my tears. But somewhere in that haze of shame and fury, a tiny, hard ember of resolve began to glow. They had taken everything from me. They would not take my future. That humiliating encounter at the restaurant was the slap in the face I needed. It was a baptism by fire. The grief and the sorrow that had been drowning me for months finally burned away, leaving behind something cold, hard, and sharp: anger. A quiet, focused rage that felt clean and powerful. I went back to Zoe's apartment, threw the food delivery bag in the trash with a satisfying thud, and made a decision. I was done being a victim. I was done crying over people who wouldn't spare me a second thought. My life wasn't over. It was just beginning. The first step was a digital amputation. I sat on Zoe's floor and systematically deleted every single one of my social media accounts. No more checking up on them, no more late-night scrolling that felt like pressing a thumb into a fresh bruise. I changed my number and told Zoe to screen my calls. When my mother called, wanting to know why I wasn't answering, Zoe, my fierce, loyal protector, told her I was busy building an empire and didn't have time for negativity. It was a clean cut. The silence was jarring at first, but then it became peaceful. It was the sound of my own thoughts, clear and sharp for the first time in months. Zoe was my rock. She didn't just give me a place to sleep, she gave me back my self-respect. She'd come home from her nursing shifts, find me hunched over my laptop, and put a bowl of soup in front of me. Eat, she'd command. Empires aren't built on an empty stomach. One night, as I was sketching out new algorithms on a cheap whiteboard we'd bought, she introduced me to her friend, Lucas. He was a fellow tech entrepreneur, but where I was broken and cautious, he was driven and optimistic. He looked at my failed startup idea, the one investors had laughed at, and he didn't see failure. He saw a diamond in the rough. "This is brilliant," he said, his eyes scanning my code with an intensity that made me feel seen. "Your approach was wrong, you were selling to consumers. This isn't a toy. This is a weapon. You need to be selling this to law firms, to corporations. B2B. This could save them millions in billable hours." A spark ignited within me, the first real warmth I'd felt in a long time. He was right. We spent the entire night brainstorming, the whiteboard filling up with diagrams and projections. We would pivot the business model from a consumer app to a powerful AI-powered contract analysis software for the legal industry. We called it Veritas AI. Truth. It felt fitting. The next 18 months were a blur of relentless, grueling work. I took a dead-end data entry job to pay my share of the bills. The salary was pitiful, the work monotonous, a soul-crushing waste of my abilities. But I swallowed my pride. I worked from 9 to 5, my mind numb, and then I would come home and work on Veritas from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. I slept in 4-hour increments, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning desire to prove everyone wrong. Lucas was right there with me, matching my energy, refining the business plan, and making connections. We argued about code, celebrated small victories with cheap pizza, and built a partnership forged in exhaustion and mutual respect. One of those connections was a ghost from my past, Daniel. He had left the Blackwood Company months ago, disgusted by their ethics and the way they treated people. He reached out to me after hearing through the grapevine what I was building. We met at a noisy coffee shop. "I'm not doing this for charity, Olivia," he said bluntly, stirring his espresso. "I'm betting on talent, and you're the most talented person they ever let walk out the door. I saw it at that party years ago. I want in. And I know their weaknesses." He provided invaluable industry knowledge and a list of contacts that would have taken us years to build. He knew which firms were desperate for the kind of efficiency we could offer. Our biggest breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. Lucas, through a friend of a friend, secured a meeting with Victoria Vance, a legendary tech investor. She was tough, sharp, and notoriously difficult to impress. In our first meeting, in her stark, intimidatingly modern office, she listened to my pitch without a word, her face an unreadable mask. When I finished, my throat dry, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "The Blackwoods," she said, her voice low and raspy. "I know them. 20 years ago, I was a young woman with an idea for a logistics software. I pitched it to a much younger Mr. Blackwood. He called it a cute hobby and told me I should focus on finding a husband." She paused, her eyes hardening. 6 months later, he launched a suspiciously similar product that became the foundation of his modern logistics division. He stole my idea, my work, and told me ambition wasn't a good look on a woman. I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight him then. She leaned forward, a fierce, predatory glint in her eyes. I've been waiting 2 decades for a chance to watch his empire crumble. Your software isn't just innovative, Ms. Chin. It's poetic justice. You have my backing. With Victoria's investment and mentorship, Veritas AI took off like a rocket. We weren't just a startup anymore. We were a threat. We were building an army, and the old guard had no idea what was coming for them. The invitation arrived in a sleek, black envelope that felt heavy with significance. I was being asked to be a keynote speaker at the annual Tech Pinnacle Conference, the most prestigious event in the industry. 18 months ago, I was delivering cold takeout to people who wouldn't look me in the eye. Now, I was being recognized as a rising star, the founder of the disruptive new company that was making waves in the legal tech world. Veritas AI had just landed its first major client, a top-tier international law firm, and the industry was buzzing. My name, Olivia Chen, was on everyone's lips. Walking into that conference hall felt like stepping into another dimension. The air crackled with energy, ambition, and the low hum of 1,000 conversations about the future. Lucas squeezed my hand. You ready for this? He whispered, his eyes shining with pride. I took a deep breath, the scent of expensive coffee and opportunity filling my lungs. I was born for this. As the host introduced me, his voice booming through the speakers, the brilliant mind behind Veritas AI, a true innovator who is reshaping the future of legal technology, please welcome Olivia Chen. I walked onto the stage. The spotlight was warm, not harsh. It felt like a welcome. I looked out at the sea of faces, hundreds of industry leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs. And then, in the front row, seated in the plush velvet chairs of the VIP section, I saw them. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, looking smug and important. And next to them, holding hands, were Ethan and Mia. Their faces told a story in 3 acts. First, confusion, a slight furrowing of the brow. Olivia? What is she doing here? Then, dawning recognition as the host's words sank in. And finally, pure, unadulterated shock. The blood drained from Ethan's face, leaving it a pasty white. Mia's perfectly made-up jaw went slack, her lipstick mouth forming a small, silent O. They were here to network, to scout for technology that could save their family's increasingly outdated business. They had walked into the lion's den, and they had just realized the lion was me. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, and began my presentation. I didn't mention them by name. I didn't have to. I told my story, cloaked in the language of business. They say that rejection is just redirection, I began, my voice clear and steady, echoing through the massive hall. I learned that lesson the hard way. I once pitched an idea to a potential mentor, someone I looked up to. He told me my ambition was misplaced. That I should focus on something more stable, more suitable for a woman. I paused, letting the words hang in the air, a deliberate, charged silence. He suggested that I wasn't cut out for this world, that my vision was too risky. I let my gaze drift over the front row, and I made direct eye contact with Mr. Blackwood. He flinched as if I'd struck him, a subtle but undeniable reaction. But the thing about vision, I continued, clicking to the next slide, is that it's invisible to those who can only see value in social status, in what's safe and predictable. The screen behind me lit up with a single, staggering chart, the exponential growth curve of Veritas AI over the last year. A wave of murmurs, of impressed whispers, rippled through the audience. That risk? That misplaced ambition? I said, my voice ringing with the triumph I had earned with blood, sweat, and tears. It's on track to automate 40% of the paralegal work traditionally handled by junior associates, saving top firms millions of dollars a year. It's projected to be a $100 million company by next year. I let that sink in. So my message to anyone out there who has ever been told they are not enough, that their dreams are too big. Is this rejection is a gift? It's the fuel. Don't let anyone else define your worth. Your potential is not up for a vote. The applause was thunderous. It wasn't just polite, it was explosive. It was a standing ovation. As I walked off the stage, my heart pounding a wild rhythm against my ribs, I felt a sense of vindication so pure, so powerful, it almost brought me to my knees. The aftermath was a blur of congratulations. People crowded around me, shaking my hand, slipping me their business cards. And then, the Blackwoods were there, pushing their way through the crowd with an air of entitlement that hadn't faded, even in their shock. "Olivia, my dear!" Mr. Blackwood boomed, his face stretched into a grotesque, friendly mask. "What a remarkable achievement! We had no idea you had it in you. We must talk about a potential partnership. Your company's innovations are impressive," Mrs. Blackwood added, her eyes darting around nervously, as if assessing my new market value. I just looked at them, these people who had deemed me unworthy, who had discarded me like a piece of trash. I gave them a polite, cool nod. "Thank you," I said, my voice a flat, emotionless wall. And then I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, flustered and irrelevant. But the confrontation wasn't over. A hand grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. It was Mia. Her designer dress looked wrinkled, her face was pale and strained beneath the expensive makeup. The triumphant smirk was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted look. "Olivia, we need to talk," she pleaded, her voice a strained whisper. "It's not what you think. My life with him, it's a cage. A gilded cage." I pulled my arm away gently, but firmly. "Mia," I said, my voice devoid of the anger I once felt. It was just empty. There's nothing left to say. I turned my back on her and walked towards Lucas, who was waiting for me with a proud, loving smile that was worth more than all the money and success in the world. The battle was over. I had won. The final blow wasn't loud. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation in a boardroom. It was a quiet, strategic move, executed with the cold precision of a surgeon. A few months after the conference, Veritas AI made a major announcement that sent tremors through the financial world. We were acquiring a smaller, struggling competitor, a company called Innovate Legal. It wasn't a random choice. Victoria, Daniel, Lucas, and I had been planning it for months. It was a masterstroke. Innovate Legal held a key patent for predictive legal analytics, a piece of intellectual property that, combined with our platform, would give Veritas an unshakable monopoly in the market. It was a brilliant business decision, celebrated on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It also just so happened that Innovate Legal was the single largest client of the Blackwood family's logistics company. Their contract wasn't just important, it was their lifeblood, accounting for nearly 60% of their annual revenue. And our acquisition deal, drafted by the best lawyer Victoria's money could buy, included a standard but ruthless clause that allowed us to terminate all existing third-party contracts immediately. The news hit the market like a shockwave. Blackwood Logistics stock, already struggling, plummeted overnight. They were ruined. It was the inevitable consequence of their own arrogance, of failing to adapt, of building their empire on outdated models and snobbery instead of innovation. My success wasn't the weapon that destroyed them, their own failure was. My victory was just the catalyst that sped up the process. The desperate calls started coming. First, from Mia. A series of tearful voicemails, filled with pleas to talk about old times, blaming Ethan, blaming his parents, blaming everyone but herself. Then, from my parents, suddenly so proud of their successful daughter, suddenly so interested in my life, subtly hinting at their own financial troubles and how a successful child should help their family. I didn't answer. I just let the voicemails pile up, little digital monuments to their hypocrisy. The final act came when Ethan showed up unannounced at my office. He looked diminished. The expensive tailored suit couldn't hide the dark circles under his eyes or the desperation that clung to him like cheap cologne. He had somehow bypassed security, claiming he was an old friend. He stood in front of my desk, in the sleek, minimalist office overlooking the city, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pain. Just a distant, clinical pity. "Olivia," he started, his voice hoarse. "I know things ended badly. I made a terrible mistake." He launched into a rambling, pathetic speech about the past, about how we were a great team, about how he always secretly believed in me. He even hinted at trouble in his marriage, a potential divorce from Mia, as if dangling the possibility of a reunion could somehow entice me. It was a transparent, disgusting lie. He finally got to the point. "Our company is in trouble. We're facing bankruptcy. We need a lifeline. A partnership with Veritas AI, it could save us. We could rebuild, together. Like we always planned." I let him finish, listening to his desperate pitch with a calm I didn't know I possessed. The silence in the room was heavy. I swiveled my chair slightly to look at Lucas, who had been standing quietly by the window the entire time, a silent pillar of support. I smiled at him, a real, warm smile filled with love and gratitude. Then I turned back to Ethan. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm and even. "This is Lucas. My business partner and my fiancé." The last bit of hope drained from Ethan's eyes, leaving them hollow. "As for your proposal," I continued, standing up, the picture of professional finality. "Veritas AI doesn't invest in failing, legacy models built on nepotism. It's not a sound business decision." I walked to the door and held it open. "I wish you the best of luck." He stared at me, speechless, for a long moment. The golden boy, the heir, reduced to a beggar. Then, he turned and walked out of my life for good. The door clicked shut, and the sound was the sweetest, most satisfying victory I had ever known. 2 years passed. 2 years of building, growing, and healing. The day Veritas AI went public was surreal. I stood on the balcony of the Nasdaq Stock Exchange, surrounded by my real family, Lucas, Zoe, and Daniel. As I rang the opening bell, watching our company's name flash in bright lights across the giant screen in Times Square, I didn't think about revenge. I thought about the scholarship student who used to spill coffee on expensive laptops. I thought about how proud she would be. We used a portion of the IPO wealth to establish the Veritas Fund, a scholarship dedicated to providing a full college fund for underprivileged women in tech. It was my way of sending the elevator back down, of making sure other brilliant women wouldn't be dismissed the way I was. My parents tried to reconcile. It was inevitable. They showed up at my new house one day, a sleek, modern home with glass walls overlooking the ocean. They came bearing gifts and awkward, stilted apologies. It was the first time I had seen them in person since before the breakup. I invited them in, served them tea in mugs that cost more than their entire dinner set, and I listened. I listened to their excuses, their revisionist history of my childhood, their newfound pride in my accomplishments. When they were done, I set my boundary. It was the hardest, and most necessary, thing I've ever done. "I forgive you," I told them, my voice steady and calm. "Not for you, but for me. I need to let go of the anger to make room for peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean amnesia. For my entire life, you chose Mia. You made your priorities clear. I accept that. From now on, our relationship, if we are to have one, will be built on mutual respect, not on a sense of familial obligation I no longer feel. The Bank of Olivia is closed." A few weeks later, Lucas and I were walking on a beach in Carmel. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He didn't get down on one knee. It wasn't his style. He just stopped, took both of my hands in his, and looked into my eyes with a love so profound it still takes my breath away. He pulled out a simple, elegant platinum ring. Engraved on the inside, in tiny binary code, was the word Veritas. Truth. It was perfect. It was us. My past was about lies and status. My future was about truth and love. I said yes without a moment's hesitation, tears of joy streaming down my face. The final, quiet chapter of that old story happened at an airport. Lucas and I were in the first-class lounge, waiting to board a flight to Tokyo for our international expansion. Across the room, I saw her. Mia. She was alone, looking tired and defeated. The designer clothes hung on her as if they belonged to someone else. Her hair was messy, her face pale. Our eyes met across the quiet, exclusive space. She started to stand up, a desperate, pleading look on her face, as if to approach me. Just then, my phone buzzed. A long, rambling text message from her popped up on my screen. Olivia, I'm so sorry, my life is a mess, Ethan is talking to a divorce lawyer, his family blames me for everything, I have nothing, I read the first few words. I saw the lifetime of excuses and blame contained in that little preview. I thought about all the pain, all the humiliation. And then I thought about my life now. About Lucas. About Veritas. About the peace I had fought so hard to find. I held my finger down on her name. A small menu popped up. Without hesitating, I pressed delete and block conversation. The thread vanished. Ready to go? Lucas asked, smiling and holding out his hand. More than ready, I said, taking his hand and squeezing it tight. We walked onto the plane, found our seats, and as the plane began to taxi down the runway, I looked out the window at the city lights below. I thought about revenge, and how people say it's a dish best served cold. But they're wrong. True victory isn't about serving revenge at all. It's about being so full, so happy, and so at peace with your own life that you're no longer hungry for it. I wasn't winning against them anymore. I was just winning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I know so many of you have faced your own betrayals. My question for you is, have you ever had to make a clean cut, to completely remove someone from your life for the sake of your own peace? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more. You are stronger than you think.